So we've waited for quite a few weeks now since it was first announced that the 1.66 beta was going to be turned into a final release. This is 1.68, so there's quite a few tweaks in here that were added on, and we've got things like last week's video, which was subsurface scattering in here now. So let's take a look at the top 5 additions to version 1.68 and then the top 5 things that I like in this version. So one little addition is instancing. So I'll just give you a little example and you can play with it at your leisure. If you take any model and then in the scene hierarchy now, you've got an instance button here at the top left, or you've got the ability to call it from here as well. So if you click those, you get an instance copy of the one that you've wanted to call from. So I'll get Gizmo activated from over here. That used to be on the menu over here. So that's now in a different place, which is I find much more useful. So I'll just move the instance copy out of the way, and then what we'll do is we'll just work on the original copy. So we'll go to move, we'll turn symmetry off, and we'll just have the move activated. And as you can see, whatever you do on your primary copy is duplicated on your instance, so that can be quite useful. And you can of course freeze this copy here, so you can just uninstance it, or you can separate it here if you want to. You can also put on, for example, you could put on symmetry, and then you could just use symmetrical modeling like so. So there's lots of ways you can use that in your own modeling. That's a good one to have a look at. And don't forget, you can keep on moving that around and still instance it as well. So you could have it in a different direction, and you could go back to the original and still move it, and it still works. So it's proportional, and it respects the model even when you've moved it off its main axis. So that is quite useful. That's one that I haven't explored that one fully yet, but I think instancing is something I use in such a lot of other programs that I think I'm going to use that a lot anyway. So let's take a look at array. So if you come up here and you say add, so we'll start from the top of the scene menu and hit add, and then instead of just primitives, you've now got group and camera, and you've got repeaters. So in the repeaters, we've got array, curve, radial, and mirror. So on the repeaters, if I just do array, I now have an array, and all of this panel appears at the top. So I can just go in and I can change, for example, the count. So I'll change the count to 9. No, I won't. I'll change it to 10. Click enter, and there's my array that way. I'll change the count on Y to 10, and there you go. So straight away we can get like a huge amount of gridded models. So there's plenty of other things in there. So you can do offset. So if we do that offset to, let's tap that and say 3, and you can offset it like that. So if this is great for doing things like armor plating, parts of vehicles, doing grids, doing grills. Obviously I've just done it with a sphere, but you can think about that and do it with whatever you need. So instancing is quite common in things like Cinema 4D and Blender and all those kind of programs. So well worth investing the time to have a look at, and have a look at the other settings in there, and also the other ones in the array settings that I showed you when we first opened it. So take a look in the add, and then try the curve, the radial, and the mirror, and you get variations on the theme of what I've showed you already. So this is possibly my favorite. So this is where we can now use a hierarchy, and it means that we can put things in that hierarchy that are then able to be moved using the hierarchy. So what does that actually mean? So I've made these leg parts here for this. This is like a big wasp. I've used this in other tutorials in recent weeks. And it's got a part that comes off the undercarriage. So that's this bit. And then I've got the first part of the leg, and then the next part of the leg, and the next part of the leg. So if they're all on their own, if they were out on their own, like so, if we move them around, then they're completely independent, and they're not going to be moved by you moving this one before them. But if you leave it in the stack like this, just by dragging it into that place, so basically you drag it underneath the one that you want it to be parented to, you can build a hierarchy like this. So as you can see, I've got them all selected now. And one thing you do have to do is make sure your pivot's in the right place. So if you take the top one and you go perspective off and then snap, and then use your pivot and locate it where you want it to pivot from. So for example there. Now, because we're at the top of the stack here in the hierarchy, if I now move this, you can animate it, like, or not animate it, but you can move it in a way that you'd want to move to pose. Now what you'd have to do is go in and move the pivot put for each one. So I'll snap that to the front and I'll just move pivot for this one, which I want to be here. Obviously how you build it will be, you know, the pivot is going to be relevant to how you've built it. Onto the next one, pivot, I'll pop that in the center, and you will notice there is snapping now, so you can actually get this a bit more accurate. I haven't played with that a lot yet, but knowing the fact that snapping's there is a great start. So just move that last one into place. Now all of those hierarchies now, if I move them, they'll all respond with the parent and the child. So you can now move these around and you can get the posing that you want as much as you want, which makes it quite a cool way to build up a character. So obviously this is mechanical, but you might want to do it with more organic pieces, make full bodies and things like that. And obviously what you can do is you can take that assembly and from where it is there, go to the very top, and you can just clone that assembly as well. So that's copied one piece, but you can select all of the parts and you can clone them as groups. So that you basically can do, and then think about the thing that we looked at before, which is the array. You could obviously do symmetrical movements across X and Y. So again, that's my favorite, I think, and well worth investing your time to understand how these hierarchies work in the new scene menu. One thing I do like in this scene menu is this ability to add and then group. So you can actually put things in a group now. So I can drag things in and out, as I've already said, but you could have a group and then just keep everything grouped, which is great, not just for things like the scene hierarchy, but just literally for keeping groups together and turning them on and off. Just makes for a cleaner, more logical way of managing your model. So my utter favorite in this release is subsurface scattering, and I've already covered this in a video which I'll put up above. And basically what it means is we've got the ability to push light through the back of thinner objects, so that might be skin or wax or milk or vegetation, and it scatters the light as it comes through. So if it comes through an ear, for example, like you can see here, what that actually does is it basically scatters the light through the blood, so you get a pink or an orangey color coming through it. And the same if you do it through a plant, you're going to get the chlorophyll, the green coming through in certain ways. So you can get some much more realistic effects with your lighting now, because you're basically adding much more real world effects to them. So things like these ears look much more realistic than when they were just the non-subsurface scattering material. So again, I've already covered it. Check that video out. It's very simple to do. It's just a light placement and you switch it on from in here. So instead of being, let's go to the right model, and then you come up to material and then you apply subsurface scattering, and all of your settings are in there. So if you don't know quite what I'm talking about, then it's worth having a look at that video. And if you do know what I'm talking about, then go and have a go of it, because it is super cool. So any of your organic creatures you might have done in the past, take your time and go and do them again with subsurface scattering turned on, and you might be surprised at how how much different your models will look with that effect. So this one is quite broad really in its scope. So this is all about the interface. So there are some, I wouldn't say major changes, but there are lots of little changes. So if we start at the top here and we look at the scene menu, this is one of the big changes here. So a lot of these buttons now are all in sequence up here. So there was another menu for things like your voxel merging and things like that, but they're all in a nice line up here now. So if we just go to any one of the models, and you've got instancing in there. You've got the voxel merging in there at the top of the scene menu now, and things like clone and join. So if you were to select 2 of them, you join them in here now. And that all is much cleaner and nicer now. And the next one along, where you've got things like multi-res, let's just go into this. You've got multi-res, voxel, dyno topo, decimate and UV, and then the last one, which is primitive. So you've got them all in a nice clean order here. So if you want to switch to voxel, it's there, dyno topo, decimate and UV unwrapping is all in there. So it's no major change if you know what you're doing. It's just a much cleaner, tweaked interface there. And over here, you've got things that are just moved a tiny bit just to clean things up a little bit. So again, I wouldn't anticipate that you would, if you came to this and you didn't know Nomad at all, obviously that wouldn't matter. But if you're an existing Nomad user, these are all just housekeeping moves really, and they just make it a little bit more user-friendly overall. I like the fact that Gizmo is now here on this menu rather than being down at the bottom down here, because I was finding it hard going down here all the time, so it's much easier having it there. Obviously it's in both places, but having it there is just sensible for me. And you've also got things like snap on here now, which is quite useful, and they're things that you will use quite a lot. So just those few changes do make things a little bit confusing if you're coming to it in the first couple of minutes when you come back to Nomad from a few weeks off, but doesn't take long at all. But overall, I think the improvements are they do help. It's just cleaned and trimmed down the interface to a little bit. So have a look at that yourself, see how it see what has changed compared to what you're used to. And then dive right into those bigger, chunkier features like subsurface scattering and the instancing. Thank you so much for watching the video, and if you do like it, please give us a thumbs up, because it does help us to get in front of other people who might like this kind of content. And if you like the video, why not subscribe to the channel, and then we can let you know when we're uploading new content. We do a wide range of courses that suit the beginner all the way up to advanced, so take a look at the links in the description and you can see what we've got on offer.